Donald Trump's whole image and propaganda is all built up off falsehood. Donald Trump constructed this whole image of him being this extravagant, great success of a businessman that started with $1 million loan from his father was all false. He had never been a good businessman, and it had always been clear evidence of that, but he had been cushioned by the class that he was born into and his whiteness.
Just about every speech, Donald Trump makes note of his wealth. Let's get a little sample before we talk about
it. Here's the good news. I'm very rich.
I don't need anybody's money. It's nice. I'm really rich.
Hello, my name is Antonio. My page is Unapologetically Black ADOS. I ask that we like and share this page and so that we can understand this message. Today, what I wanted to discuss with us is propaganda. How Donald Trump has been able to use the propaganda of him being a successful businessman in order to propel him to the Oval Office when it was all based on a lie. But his history of doing this goes as far back as him lying in order to get himself on the Forbes list in order to create the persona of himself as this great entrepreneur.
Candidate Donald Trump often touted his business success as proof he'd be able to run the country well. But as investigative journalist Jonathan Greenberg revealed in the Washington Post today, Trump repeatedly conned his way onto the Forbes 400 list of the richest people in the country in the early 80s, even posing as an employee from the Trump Organization named John Barron to talk up Trump's so-called wealth. Here is John Barron telling Greenberg that Trump's net worth was higher than what Forbes had previously reported.
Okay, what's your first name, Danny? John Barron. Well, let me tell you what the deal is, just so you understand. Okay. Mr. Trump bought, first of all, most of the assets have been consolidated to Mr. Trump, you know, because you have down Fred Trump. And I'd like to talk to you off the record if I can, just to make your thing easier. Somebody had mentioned that you had asked about that, or somebody had, and it's been pretty well consolidated, okay?
Greenberg notes that at the time he pushed back on Trump's claims about his net worth, but didn't realize how much he inflated his own numbers. Greenberg points out that this was a model Trump would use for the rest of his career, telling a lie so cosmic that people believed that some kernel of it had to be true. The tactic landed him a place he hadn't earned on the Forbes list of richest people and led to future accolades, press coverage, and deals, and eventually paved a path toward the presidency. I'm joined now by Bloomberg View columnist Tim O'Brien.
Donald Trump always understood the power of media and how it could benefit him in business, and he always used media as a means to prop himself up into a position that he was never in. Sad for our people that we tend to ignore all of these characteristics about a person before we decide to empower him into a political position.
Burdened by debt, the Taj would not turn a profit. By that winter, as Rothman predicted, the casino was in serious trouble.
His business condition was terrible, worse than terrible. We were in a deep recession and people weren't going to Atlantic City. So the revenue stream from Atlantic City, the Taj Mahal, and the other casinos was poor.
Trump's other investments had not fared much better. The Plaza Hotel, a financial disaster. The airline Trump shuttle was bleeding money.
He sort of blamed the people around him for what went wrong instead of himself.
He started blaming people, he started firing people, started yelling at people. He said, I can be a screamer, and he certainly was, according to various accounts.
Trump had long cast himself as a winner.
If we believe, like Trump did, that his record as an entrepreneur would be an indication of how he will perform as president, then why again would we elect a person who is continuously in bankruptcy? how would he be identified as a person that will believe to make America financially great when he come from wealth and have financially ruined himself?
Now he was looking like a loser.
I think that the downtime for him was really a shock, and he was not prepared for it. It caught him totally off guard, but it was probably the biggest challenge of his life.
The Donald is facing an incredible cash crisis.
Big troubles for Donald Trump.
Trump and his companies owed more than $3 billion, much of it to the banks that had fueled his spending spree.
As quickly as the banks loved him, that's as quick as they saw him as a pariah. He was like, ugh, it's Donald Trump. They didn't want to have anything to do with him. They wanted their money and they wanted to be rid of Donald Trump.
The bankers descended on Trump Tower.
Bankers held gigantic meetings at Trump Tower with like 40 banks, all sitting around in a room. Donald very sober, looking like not quite penitent perhaps, but serious.
When you were talking to him in these meetings, it just didn't seem that he had any idea how big the problem was or how it would be resolved. But
this is what we see as a successful businessman, right? Someone who was loaned billions of dollars to get businesses such as a casino that could not take a ton of profit when you have places like Milwaukee where you have the Native Americans with no business history, was not born wealthy or built casinos from the ground up. The house always wins. But this is what we consider to be a successful businessman just because he said so. Just because people gave him millions and millions of dollars in order to build these structures in which he could not generate a positive return. How is that a successful businessman? And if that was his example of which he was going to run the company on, why would you vote and promote that? Why would you want that at the head of the country? Let's be realistic unless you want the country to fail.
as far as being a CEO, in understanding numbers and understanding the ramifications, it doesn't seem like he took economics or accounting in college.
Donald Trump's assets are on the line. Citibank and Trump's other lenders are working on
The bankers faced a fundamental decision.
The Trump Organization confirmed today.
It was at a time when we all were trying to figure out, is it better off this guy being alive financially, or is it better off having him dead financially?
As they stared into the Trump Organization's abyss, the banks came to believe that Trump's assets, the buildings, the casinos, were worth more with his name on them than in foreclosure.
If they were to take Trump out of it, they would no longer have the name for the casinos, which was a tremendous part of their allure. Otherwise, basically, what could they do? Liquidate and take a tremendous hit.
The brand was worth now so much that bankers were willing to take a haircut in order to hang on to the name.
You have to understand Donald Trump was able to brand himself as a luxury because he didn't understand return on investment. He was able to do this using other people's money based off his father's success, not his own. And when given the money, he placed the money into investments, into buildings, and he overspent in the buildings to the point where he could not gather the return to justify the investment, causing a collapse in the empire. But the issue is that if banks were to foreclose on those large assets, then they could be looked at as a loss on their own profit sheets, which would make their businesses look bad. So it came off better giving Trump a haircut, making him have to pay fees and keeping the business and keeping the debt in the asset columns that's owed by Trump, even though you're not expecting to get paid. Trump set the field for too big to fall because people had too much money invested in him based off of the hype that he had built up off himself, and he was able to use other people's money to show luxury.
The Trump princess is said to have a price
They
tag
sold the
of
yacht and the airline.
Trump may have to unload the Trump shuttle, worth about
And they put Trump on a $450,000 a month allowance. In exchange, he would continue to promote the business.
I think bankers look at Trump as a promoter, not as a CEO. At least that's the way I looked at him. And if you talk to other bankers, I think they share that opinion. He's a wonderful promoter. He's the P.T. Barnum of the 21st century.
Donald Trump may have pulled off his biggest deal to date.
Donald Trump had survived.
Are working on a bailout plan that would restructure.
He was too big to fail.
The bankers do not want Trump to file for bankruptcy.
So you see, Donald Trump was able to prance around the world and on television using the media to show off this luxury off of other people's dimes. And this was allowed Trump to be branded and his name to become synonymous with luxury. But we forget the business failure because human beings have very short-term memory. Donald Trump, however, understanding the power of propaganda and benefiting off of his failure, was able to land The Apprentice.
1 month after
A lot of people did.
I said, this man is going to be the Republican nominee. Right. I said I'm Bill Maher. Everybody laughed. They
You're
thought
one
I was,
of us, and we're a
They
minority.
thought I was joking, and I said, well, that's because, fellow lefty liberals, you don't watch Celebrity Apprentice.
That was Michael Moore talking to us just after the election about the rise of Donald Trump. The New Yorker is out with a new piece profiling producer Mark Burnett and his part in the ascension of Donald Trump through the creation of the Apprentice TV show. Former Apprentice editor Jonathan Braun told the magazine, quote, "Most of us knew Trump was a fake. He had just gone through I don't know how many bankruptcies, but we made him out to be the most important person in the world. It was like making the court jester the king."
According to the New York Times, in the 2 years preceding the debut of The Apprentice, Mr. Trump's side income was mostly confined to $500,000 for appearing in the Big and Tasty Burger ad and a small amount of book royalties.
How reality TV handed Trump a $427 million lifeline. Tax records show that The Apprentice rescued Donald Trump, bringing him new sources of cash, a myth that would propel him to the White House. From the backseat of a stretch limousine headed to meet the first contestant for his new TV show, The Apprentice, Donald J. Trump bragged that he was a billionaire who had overcome financial hardship. "I used my brains, I used my negotiating skills, and I worked it out," he told viewers. "Now my company is bigger than it ever was and stronger than it ever was. It was all a hoax." Months after that inaugural episode in January 2004, Mr. Trump filed his individual tax return reporting $89.9 million in net loss from his core businesses for the prior year. The red ink spilled from everywhere, even as American television audiences saw him as a savvy business mogul with Midas touch.
With us now, the reporter behind the New Yorker piece, Patrick Radden Keefe. And Patrick, there's a line in the piece that I was fascinated by as Burnett and the producers walked through Trump Towers and were walking through his offices as they were preparing to try to turn this man into king. They saw chipped chairs. They saw other signs actually of a business that was holding on for dear life, far from being some business titan. This looked like a man who we walked through I'll just read it. We walked through the offices and saw it ship furniture. We saw a crumbling empire at every turn. Our job was to make it seem otherwise. Talk about that.
Well, this was, for me, the crazy thing about The Apprentice. I lived in New York in the 1990s, and I remember Donald Trump being kind of a punchline. You know, you'd read about him on page 6. The weirdness of the show is that at the point where Mark Burnett, the producer of The Apprentice, found Trump was kind of at a low point. But they remold him as this titan, and the idea is this is one of the most successful people in the world. It would be a privilege for anyone to come and be tutored by him as his apprentice. And so you end up in this kind of strange situation in which they take a guy who's, as the guy said, you know, we take the court jester and we remake him as the king.
Well, it was.
You see here, the producers of The Apprentice knew that everything they put on about Donald Trump as a successful businessman was nothing but a facade. And Donald Trump himself understood that this was a facade, but it was an opportunity he could use to rebrand, further branding himself as a successful businessman that he wasn't. This is why you've seen him pitching so many goods, is because he profited off his celebrity status, not actually off of being a businessman. Athletes make money off being celebrities. From playing basketball, they get paid endorsement for commercials. This makes Donald Trump no different than a celebrity. He's an athlete or anything of that nature. He is not a good businessman. Why do you all think that he should be president? 12 years later, that image of the self-made, self-saved mogul beamed into the national consciousness would help fuel Mr. Trump's improbable election to the White House. But while the story of The Apprentice is by now well known, the president tax returns reveal another grand twist that has never been truly told. How the popularity of that fictional alter ego rescued him, providing a financial lifeline to reinvest himself yet again, and then how in an ego of the boom and bust cycle that has defined his business career, he led himself towards the financial shoals he must navigate today. Mr. Trump genuine it turned out wasn't running a company, it was making himself famous. Trump scales famous and monetizes that fame. See, what we don't understand is that Trump didn't understand return on investment. So what he did was, when he built the Trump Tower and he got the funding from that based off his daddy's success and his daddy's name, he overspent on luxury. And this gave him the image of Richie Rich, even though he lost money, but other people was able to upsell their own products by using the Trump name and benefit off of Trump loss and his ill understanding of return on investment. By analyzing the tax records, the New York Times was able to place a value on Mr. Trump's celebrity, while the return shows that he earned some $197 million directly from The Apprentice over 16 years, roughly in line with what he was claimed. That they also revealed that an additional $230 million flowed from the fame associated with it. The show's big ratings meant that everyone wanted a piece of the Trump brand, and he grabbed at the opportunity to rent it out. There was $500 to pitch double stuffed Oreos, another $500,000 to sell Domino's Pizza, and $850,000 to push a laundry detergent. There was 7-figure licensing deals with hotel buildings, some with murky backgrounds in former Soviet republics and other developing countries, and there were schemes with exploited, misplaced trust in the TV version of Mr. Trump, who off-camera peddled worthless, get-rich-quick Nostrums like Donald Trump Way of Wealth, seminars that understand after Donald Trump blew a $400 million inheritance from his father, billions of dollars in loans from banks, he was given another opportunity with the windfall from The Apprentice, generates money off of advertisement and off of the show, ends up buying a bunch of more failing business ventures. He clearly shows you, he repeatedly shows you, he is a very bad businessman. I'm trying to see what business record that you all have of Donald Trump that makes you see that he is being successful. You stuck upon the trinkets. You stuck upon the image of wealth that has been presented to you, the propaganda. You're sold by the smoke and mirrors.
According to the New York Times, in the 2 years preceding the debut of The Apprentice, Mr. Trump's side income was mostly confined to $500,000 for appearing in the Big and Tasty Burger ad and a small amount of book royalties.